responsible data strategy can actually materialize in the coming years. So we'll look at that as it develops. One thing that caught my eye in the strategy is that Belgium wants to use the public sector and government for experiments in AI. Now, what better country to do that than Belgium, which has, as you know, 6 governments? So I guess the idea is you experiment, and if you break one, you move on to the next one. Let me please welcome on stage our distinguished guests, Minister Philippe de Backer for the digital agenda, as well as administrative simplification, which is also a very Belgian competence. Then please, Mieke de Ketelaere, who is a Customer Intelligence Director at SAS. Thank you. Mieke. And we have Frédéric Pivetta, who's founder and managing partner at Dalberg Data Insights. I might add that we're 4 Belgians on stage, but as Belgians, we choose a lingua franca that suits everyone, including you.
It's always English.
Minister de Backer, Philippe, I may start with you. We've heard about the German and the French ideas on artificial intelligence. So, straightforward question, how is Belgian strategy going to beat those two?
Because it's Belgium. AI is a very complex thing. And there's one thing that Belgians can manage really well is complexity. So I think that's the clear answer in that. No, I think that, as you said, I mean, it fits into the European strategy, of course. But I think that, as was also said before, that each country has its strengths and weaknesses. And I think that each country also should, in that European strategy, try to focus and try to mix and see where AI can really be added value to the spear points of their own economy. What we wanted to do with the AI strategy, the AI for Belgium, was really also to tap into the network of expertise that Belgians across the globe have in Europe, outside Europe, and really create also a strategy bottom-up, not something in an ivory tower created on the side by politicians or technocrats, but really also getting the input from the people in the field, taking all those recommendations on board and really coming up with a clear strategy moving forward. The second thing that we decided to do was not just to launch a paper strategy. In the launch this morning, we also clearly gave the room to people who are already working in AI or announcing that within our new AI strategy, they will start developing certain things. For example, there was the announcement of a €100 million fund by Capricorn who is going to invest in AI. There was the announcement of an interdisciplinary university center that's going to be created with the different universities. So, I mean, all these things, it's already meat on the bone. It's not just a strategy starting from scratch. There is meat on the bone. There is a lot of expertise in Belgium. We want to showcase it. We want to connect people. And we want to connect it also with the European strategy.
Mm-hmm. You're looking for 1 billion by 2030, if I read.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Where is that money coming from?
Well, that money will, in large part, come from the private sector itself. I mean, we know that, for example, a lot of investment firms are interested, but also a lot of industries will have to go through a transformation. So there will be also investment from that side, but also partly from the public side. I think the public side, in that respect, should really focus on skills. That's really where the public sector should, I think, initially put their money on education, retraining of people, helping industries transform and go through the process that was described here earlier. I think that is really the core competence at that moment of the government. There can be some money on the side for, let's say, fund-to-fund investment or co-investment or subsidies and grants to research projects. But in that respect, I'm also looking to Europe and to really tap also into the money that's available at that level.
Mm-hmm. Frédéric, if I might pull you in, I think one question is, how can Belgium distinguish itself in sort of amongst 27 European countries, EU countries, many other countries in this race for artificial intelligence? A lot of what Dalberg does and what you do in your career is outside of Belgium. So looking from abroad at Belgium, what do you see as Belgium's strengths?
as Philippe de Backer said before, the public sector is very strong in Belgium, and in many aspects, the public sector can basically help and support and accelerate the development in artificial intelligence, which would mean, very practically, I mean, you can be very innovative in the public sector. You can change the procurement processes to make sure that you can also allow for failures, because AI is a pretty new technology, so you need to allow for failures, which is pretty weird and complicated when you talk about public sector, because you take the money from taxpayers at the end and you have a service to deliver somehow. Another element that we can see around the globe is, and we're going to come to that later in the conversation, I think, is it's building basically like a data platform or a data strategy. I mean, Bertrand mentioned that for France. I mean, we probably have like the same approach in Belgium, and that's kind of very innovative and also very needed, because no data, no AI. I mean, it's very complicated to develop any AI algorithms without any data. So, and involving the private and the public sector in building that data strategy and data ecosystem is pretty key and pretty innovative.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're going to come back on the issue of data later in our discussion as well. I think one of the eye catchers of today's news coming from Belgium that has a much broader significance as well, I think, is the survey that came out that asked Belgians of their perception of artificial intelligence. So maybe, first of all, it showed a great distrust in artificial intelligence, I believe. That's the line that came out of the first reports as well. So my question is, why? Why do people distrust artificial intelligence? I might ask Mieke.
I think that's because, first of all, they don't understand. I mean, we are overwhelmed by the marketing hype, artificial intelligence. Colgate comes out with a toothbrush powered by artificial intelligence, where it's nothing at all. Whereas they start seeing things in the news where artificial intelligence goes wrong. So people just put it all in one heap, and they just don't understand what it is and what it's not. So I think it's our task to demystify that and to put, back trust into the story, by explaining and by showing examples where it does help, where it does bring value, if it's in the political world, if it's in the medical world, etc. So people need more real-life examples in order to demystify and take the marketing buzz from the real value it can bring.
That public awareness, is that a responsibility of the government, or is it responsibility of the sector?
It's both. I mean, one of the interesting figures that came out, that the more people they said they knew and understood about AI, the more trustworthy AI was in their eyes. So I mean, that really shows that the demystifying and the trust aspect and the information aspect is important. And awareness, on the one hand, comes from the government and explaining and creating frameworks, but it's also about showcasing. It's creating, and I think Wendy said it best in the beginning, we'll have to be able in Europe to really build AI also. And that will also allow people to come in contact with it in a direct way, through their family who work in these kind of businesses, and that will install trust again.
I think we heard the example of Volkswagen, who shut a factory and retrained 5,000 people. Do you see that happening in Belgium?
I hope so. I was very disappointed a couple of weeks ago when we have a very complicated wage bargaining system in Belgium. More details after the dessert. But the discussion went on and on and on about one thing. Do people get a wage increase of 1.8% or 2%? There was no discussion whatsoever about retraining of people, lifelong learning, digital skills. Although there was a very interesting report published by Agoria, the trade union of the bigger technological industry, a couple of weeks before, describing sector by sector what would be the challenges, what kind of jobs would disappear, what kind of jobs would be created, what kind of skills people would need to stay in that industry. So, I mean, let's have a debate about that. That's really about the future of your economy. That's really about the future of what kind of jobs people will have in the future. It's about education, it's about lifelong learning, and it's also about taking back control of your own lifelong career. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was another number which was published a couple of weeks ago, said that an overwhelming majority of people actually have a negative attitude towards retraining on the job. Well, also on that mentality, we'll have to work. We'll have to make clear to people that they are the responsible of their own career, which implies a system of lifelong learning. It's also about changing that mentality.
Why do you think that was the case? So, to illustrate, the data point was, I think, around 4 in 5.
Yeah, it was like 60, 70%, 75%. I mean, a lot of people are resistant to retraining on the job. And I mean, that comes from a mentality where you start working and you're 18 or 22 and you do your career for 40 years in the same job. That time is over. We understand that. So I mean, that is something that you also will have to instill in a generation of 45, 50, 55 years old, who have a lot of talent, a lot of capabilities, but who also have to understand that there will have to be some retraining and lifelong learning also at that point in their careers. We can do a lot of things about the youngsters and the kids. That's also a separate debate, I think. I think our educational system should be much more flexible, should be much more able to respond to what are some of the needs, and at least some of the backgrounds of the technologies which are going on right now. But it's also about retraining some older people in the workforce and not just putting them outside of the workforce, because we had also cases in Belgium where people of 55, 60 years old get expelled from their companies, they put into early leave systems. We need all that talent. They have a lot of talent, but with a little bit of retraining, they can do a perfectly new job.
Mieke, over the main course, we were talking about your work in terms of this awareness raising, and that you also do tech talks TED talks, for younger children.
Exactly.
Who's easiest to train in AI? Is it kids or is it adults?
Well, that's a tough one. But the type of teaching is different. I think for kids, it's really starting from the basics, but the speed of learning is extremely fast. They get it pretty fast. I find with adults, it's a different type of learning that you have to go to. But I agree with the point that was said is where we can benefit the adults is the mass of experience they have in, for example, in certain sectors or in certain business, which is as important for AI to learn from as just teaching them on the data science part. You know, it's learning from the business experiences. It was also mentioned before, like psychologists, psychiatrists, all these type of intelligence, which is also intelligence, that needs to be incorporated into AI. In order to debias systems, etc. And this is with adults, that you won't find with youngsters. So it's a different type of learning. You can't compare one to the other one.
In terms of the hiring, Frédéric, what are you looking for? Is it social scientists or is it the engineers? What's sort of?
To be honest, at the beginning we started looking mostly for technical people. I don't know whether you have tried to be managing a team of only technical people, but it's like managing like opera divas. I mean, it's pretty hard. No, and more seriously, what I mean is that we need to diversify, for sure. Because if you only focus on technical people, you're going to miss the bridge between the technical insights that you might derive from algorithms and from data and how you can apply it to the real world. And basically, you're going to miss the whole impact. So sometimes you build the most beautiful algorithms, they are really perfect, the insights are great. But if you can't communicate the insights, because you don't have people who have been designing tools or who can just tell a story around these insights, you're going to miss the impact. And so that's why you need all these diverse background when you do AI, and not only technical background. You need people who got immersed in societies, trying to understand how people behaves in front of different dashboards, different design of dashboards, different design of products. That's very important as well. That's why you need such a diversified team somehow.
There's also a global competition to get the right people on board, I guess, especially if you look at sort of the bigger companies. So, and this is a question that sort of extends to every European country, I think. How can Belgium, and by extension European countries, how can they attract Silicon Valley engineers? How can they attract sort of the most talented engineers from Asia to come work here? I guess you start by not talking about the weather, but beyond that.
Talk about the food.
Yeah, okay. Philippe, maybe for you.
It's actually, I mean, we need to train people here in Belgium, of course, ourselves. I mean, the educational system will have to adapt, universities will have to adapt. I mean, that's very clear. There is a new reality out there. The second part is that what I've learned from my past in the private sector is also that you need to build ecosystems. And I think what we're trying to do in Belgium is exactly that. Leverage on the expertise that is here, making sure that the major industries in Belgium are using and implementing AI. By doing that, also creating a trickle-down effect into, for example, SMEs. I mean, creating this ecosystem is really, really important. And I think when you do that and are able and capable of doing that and getting to world-class standards in certain specific industries, the talent will also automatically come. I mean, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for the ecosystem to be creative, to have their input, to have an impact on what exactly is going on. And the last part, of course, and this is not always easy from a small country that is Belgium, is scalability. You have to be able to scale at a very rapid pace. The speed of technological innovation is going so fast that you need to also scale your companies at a very, very fast pace. And this is something that in Belgium and in Europe as a whole, we've not always been very good at. So that's also something that we should look at, because the markets are still quite diverse, and the single digital market is not yet complete and things like that. So it's really also a task for the next European Commission to really start looking at where are the fracture lines and where do we need to push forward some legislation or some mentality change or some regulators, whatever, to make sure that this also is smoothing out this European single market.
If I just one follow-up on that, maybe. I mean, you've done this now for I think how many years?
Politics.
The ministry job and then the state secretary job before.
3.5 years.
And you were an MEP before that.
For 5 years, yes.
Exactly. So what's been? You've announced that you're going out of politics after this term. But luckily, you've said that you would be a part of the caretaker government for as long that needs to continue.
But I have a new job.
And you know Belgium has a world record in not having a government, so we might have you for a little while longer.
Last time it was 18 months.
Yeah, exactly.
I announced I retired, and there was a former minister who said, yeah, I've been a minister in the caretaking government for 18 months, so you're not leaving yet.
So don't just say yes to that next job yet. My question was, were you satisfied with the response that you've gotten within the council, the EU Council, within sort of the initiatives that you've seen at the European level in the past 18 months?
Yes and no. On one hand, you see progress. I mean, the fact that every national government is presenting an AI strategy, I think, is something which should be applauded. On the other hand, what I often hear, and it was also a little bit visible in the previous discussion, the French and the Germans say, okay, but we're developing a strategy, and that's then going to be the European strategy. Yeah, it doesn't always work like that, because you often miss also in that respect some diversity, some expertise, which is not present in those larger countries. And I think that is something that at the European level, of course, there are power balances. I'm not naive. I mean, I know how politics works after 10, 15 years working in politics. But I think that at that moment, the European Commission should play a much more important role. You've also seen it in other files, that sometimes we really need to really develop firstly this European strategy, where then the specificities of countries can play the role and really can benefit from that European strategy, and not the other way around.
Mm-hmm. Let's maybe look back at the artificial intelligence strategy and look at the aspect of data. I think two recurring words are ethics and privacy. This is something that continuously comes up whenever people are talking about AI. And the document describes the Belgian way of tackling these issues as building a responsible data strategy. Frédéric, you co-wrote that work as well. So let me ask you, what is a responsible data strategy? What does that actually mean?
So a responsible data strategy is to try to have an adult and proactive discussion about building an ecosystem, as you mentioned, but not here about skills, but around data. Because in many countries, what you see is that you talk about data when everything collapsed. I mean, we started talking about data when you had the Facebook and Cambridge Analytica case. I mean, here, we try to be proactive in that, and there are two elements in the, I would say, responsible data strategy. One element is an ethical, it's an element around ethic, a pillar around ethics. We believe that you need to have like a strong framework that makes sure that you are ethical. That might mean many things. I mean, you might think about rules, regulation, the ethic committee. You can also build ethics by design in your tools, respecting privacy. I think Mieke is going to talk about it. And so that's one pillar. The second pillar is basically building like a real data ecosystem with not only the big tech giants, but also the private corporations, because I would say like a significant percentage, I would say 40, 50%, whatever the percentage is, of data are behind the firewalls of all the telecom operators, the banks, etc., etc. I mean, sure, the data market today is very much an oligopoly somehow. You have Facebook, Google, Amazon, etc. on one side, then you have the big corporations, and really everybody has been playing around on the gray zone on who owns the data. And we believe that, first of all, the data they are owned by the people who generate the data. And secondly, you need to build an ecosystem to leverage these data that are behind the firewalls, of Facebook, Google, etc., but also behind the firewalls of the private corporations and also from the public sector. I mean, that's really important to underline that you need a lot of cooperation between public and private sector and moving and probably double down as well on open data policies. I mean, all these things are important to build like a, I would say, I wouldn't use the word market for data, but almost. I mean, market for data looks a little bit more too much capitalist for many people, but frankly, at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's a market for data.
Mm. How do you get the companies that hold the most data in the world to open up their data sets? I mean, that's a big challenge, right? I mean, you must...
It's a huge challenge. I mean, it's a huge challenge, and it's going to be a huge challenge because, I mean, the business model is built around data for them. I mean, if you take Google, Amazon, or Facebook, it's around data, so it's going to be a challenge. But you have other things, like, for instance, the PSD2 regulation in the financial sector. It opens the data from the financial system, for the financial players. So there are tools and there are ways to think about how to make a playground for data scientists to play and develop AI tools. Because if there is no data, again, there's not going to be any AI algorithms that you're going to be able to develop. And then we're going to depend on the data from China and the US, with all the biases that it will bring. Because imagine, I mean, the Chinese have been generating data. If you need to develop insights for Europe based on these data, it means that all the products that we're going to develop in Europe are going to be based on the Chinese culture, which is fine, I mean, for many aspects, but which might be not fine for many others.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And Mieke, I know you're sort of also making a case outside of this room that maybe the emphasis or the recurring discussion on privacy is not helping us much in the artificial intelligence.
Well, the way it's presented is not helping. I mean, and even if I listen to the discussions tonight, we're talking about a data hub, and it gives the impression to many of us that the point is to bring the data to the hub and then run your algorithms on it. Whereas there have been many efforts done in the data sciences environment where you actually are going to turn it around. You're actually going to bring the algorithms to the data and not the opposite way around. Not only trained algorithms, we already do that, for example, for MasterCard Europe. If you want to check payment fraud, you want to be straight on the data stream, where the latency is very, very short, and be on the edge and detect it right there. But we also do it now when you are training the algorithms. So that could be, for example, a very good case in health data, where you keep the patient's data in the hospitals, and it's actually the algorithm that's partially trained in a central place. It comes to the hospital, gets retrained on the data from the hospital, then leaves the hospital again. And that's called federated learning. That's a technique that's out there, that's been tested, and could be an option to protect privacy for many times. A second one is synthetic data. The use of synthetic data was created for those places where we didn't have enough real data. Well, they've done recently some hackathons where they've given teams synthetic data and the other teams real data. The results of the algorithms, the accuracy of the algorithms is exactly the same. So if you put these trained algorithms out in public environments, they make the same decisions. So it's another way you could look at to tackle the privacy issue. There's a third way, and that's a way that's more used by Google and Amazon, but it's where you're going to change part of the data. You're not going to anonymize it because we know it's always possible to de-anonymize, but you actually put noise into certain parts of the data. So there's different techniques to work around that privacy concept in order to make sure that you still can build funky, innovative solutions based on personal data. So, and it's not known. It's just one of these things that's lost in translation between data scientists and business.
Mm-hmm. Philippe, you've mentioned in terms of Belgium needs to find its strengths, has also a better chance of competing worldwide if you look at niche sectors. Which are those niche sectors? Can you point at a couple of companies or sectors, maybe not companies, that
I think the public sector is an interesting case. You made a joke about it when we entered the stage, but actually we have a lot of data also in Belgian public sector and across different levels. And so, I mean, if you are able, which we are trying to do now, to build also, let's say, a backbone strategy when it comes to open data and other sources, you will give an impetus to a lot of research, a lot of companies directly. That's one case where I can see a lot of good things happening. The second one is health. I mean, we also have a very strong public health sector. We have a very vibrant life sciences biotech sector. We have a lot of pharma companies here. So also there, being a hub for research and development of those companies here in Belgium is going to be important. I mean, when you talk about privacy, I mean, we implemented the GDPR in Belgium in such a way that we give a lot of leeway, a lot of space for doing research and development here in this country. So for us, it's an asset. I mean, for us, it's really an asset that if we can really, we did frame it in a good way, I think, and it has become an asset to do research and development here. And the last point, we have a very clear and very strong petrochemical industry coupled with logistics. I mean, is there anything better suited to do AI than logistics, complex mobility movements, shipping, and at the same time making sure that processes behind in the factories, in the chemical plants are still kept up to date. I mean, all those elements are, I think, three very clear-cut cases where a strong focus of AI in Belgium could really lead to something spectacular and also can become an export product at that moment. So that's something that we're looking at right now.
I think at the same time, these are very specific areas, I think, or dreams. My question is, if we're so specific, have we stopped sort of dreaming big? And I know that like 5 years ago, the whole conversation in Brussels at the European level was, are we still creating the European Google? How are we going to do that? Have we ended that? Have we stopped dreaming big?
Totally not. I mean, if you look at one example, and one thing that was announced today was, for example, the collaboration between the Free University of Brussels and Colibra. Colibra is a Belgian unicorn. I mean, no, we have not stopped dreaming big. It takes a special kind of people to bring the company all the way up there, but it is possible. It can be done. There are Belgian examples of people who are doing this. So yes, absolutely, dream big. I mean, my previous job was in venture capital. If somebody said, yeah, I need five years' time to develop something in Belgium, then maybe I go to the Netherlands. Yeah, no way that's a company where you're going to invest in. It's all about speed, it's all about scalability, it's all about going all out. You need to conquer the world from day one, or at least attempt to conquer the world from day one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Frédéric, do you think we should dream bigger, or we're right at the right level?
No, we are never at the right level. I think we need to be dreaming much bigger. There are ways to do this. For instance, and Philippe brought that before. I mean, we have the GDPR in Belgium. GDPR offers business opportunities that are totally untackled so far. Belgium could become the AI lab for Europe, for instance. I mean, it's a small country, pretty heterogeneous. I mean, you have like the Dutch part, the French-speaking part, etc., etc. So, I mean, it could be very interesting for many big players to test many things in Belgium and then to scale it up. But Belgium would benefit from that, and Belgium can also, by the way, initiate that sometimes. So, I think there are many ways where we can dream much bigger than what we do. And especially on when it comes to AI and data, I mean, frankly, there's no limit so far. We haven't been touching the limit at all. We are really far from it. And when you see what, and I don't want to compare because numbers are numbers, but when you see what the Chinese are investing or the US is investing, frankly, I mean, it means that they have been dreaming bigger than us so far. And so it means that we need to start pulling resources together and dream bigger, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, we also have a German-speaking community in the country as well for our German guests.
Germans as well.
That too, so there's a connection there. Mieke, if I can ask you the last question. So we were talking about the fact that it needs to be more explained and explainable what AI does and how it sort of is present already in our daily lives and daily use of technology. So if we were to sort of tweet or send one example of really interesting AI that we use or see every day, us in the room, but also people outside the room, which one would that be? What do you think is sort of the most interesting example of how to tell the story of how AI is already sort of in our lives and already present in our use?
Just one story.
Just one.
That's,
you can do many as well if you want.
I find this a tough question because what I see is, it's the same when you talk in front of an audience. One story that I might like very much is something that somebody else finds totally not attractive. So it's a difficult question. What can I say? Yeah, no, I'm not going to invent anything. I think there's so many good examples out there that there's not one just pops up in my mind that will just have somebody, all of us interested in. But for me, and it's my personal opinion, The one that I want to rephrase the most is the places where we're not aware of it. So we all read the news, newspapers, etc. The fact that it's personalized, used by, done by AI, and the fact that it can narrow our view on the world, that we have to proactively ourselves open up and step out from time to time in order to make sure that we don't go to that narrow path. That's something that I like to point out. So it's not just AI, but it's the impact of AI on our lives. And everybody reads news, whatever it is, sport news, political news, cultural news, etc. So the impact of news using AI and making sure that we step out, that would be one that I rephrase a couple of times in my life to my friends, to my family, etc.
Okay, great. The work starts today, I guess, because the strategy is out, so now it has to materialize.
We're already working. We're here tonight.
Exactly. Let me just thank you very much for a fun conversation, and to everyone in the room, let me just end with a couple of remarks. So, as you know, this was only the start of the AI Summit. We continue tomorrow, and you're warmly invited, if I find the right card at least, you are warmly invited to join us at 8:30 tomorrow morning. We'll have coffee. We'll also have breakfast. I might just thank our partners for the event, so Intel and Huawei, obviously, for the support. And obviously, thank you all for being here tonight. And I hope the dinner conversation was interesting, and it leads to more interesting insights tomorrow. There's one logistical thing I wanted to repeat, which is you've got sort of cards, or at least papers, explaining there is an app for this event. And you can download that and make sure that you're sort of up to date about the schedule. I think it's also a networking app, so apart from sort of talking to each other on the table, you can find each other's details there as well. I have the pleasure of bringing dessert also, so there's still dessert to come. And thank you so much for the evening. It was a pleasure. And a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you.
Thanks again, everybody. One quick note, actually 2 quick notes before you pack up and go. The first one is to say a big thanks also to our knowledge partner, McKinsey Global Institute. And dessert is not coming to you. You have to go to dessert. It's downstairs. And I'll look forward to seeing all of you downstairs and then again tomorrow. Thanks.